Hey guys, welcome back. Uh, Today we are joined by DJ again. How's it going, DJ?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Today we're gonna be looking at diets. Uh, this is something I'm pretty passionate about. Uh, I'm
Uh,
a I'm a runner, so I view diet as a really important part to be a successful athlete, but I also think it's obviously just a really important part of being a healthy individual, regardless of what you're doing. So it's something I'm
yeah,
really passionate about.
that's where I'm kind of coming from. I've just been getting into running and just been getting into kind of fitness and health as a whole. And diet's been a big thing that I've been trying to navigate through with all the different diets and finding which one works the best for me.
I think one of the important things, people, there's a, there's kind of two schools of thought almost, where there's like the science diet, where we're like trying to use our new understanding and our technology and all that stuff to figure out what is the optimal diet. And then there's the paleo diet route, where we're trying to look back into our past to see what historically we have eaten, because we seem to think that what we have eaten in the past is probably what we should be eating. I used to be of that school of thought, but now I'm starting to shift away from it a little bit, because we need to realize that what people have historically eaten is just what they had available to them. And they didn't have any goal besides living to reproduce. Our goals in today's day and age are much more complicated. We want to be self-actualized. We want to live long, healthy lives. We don't care about just getting to that age of reproduction and passing down our genes. We want to be well. So,
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
went down that same path. I actually went vegan for 6 weeks and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the energy, but the more I looked into it, the more I realized, especially when it comes to like vitamin B12, there's just some holes in the like whole vegan diet, and especially with the idea that like French fries are vegan. There's a
Yeah.
lot of junk food that can be vegan. So now I'm trying to transition to more of a whole food based approach and incorporating animal products occasionally to have like a healthier overall diet.
And that's where I've ended up as well. I was vegan for about 2 years. Um and now where I am is I'm at a whole foods plant-based diet, where probably like 95% of my calories come from whole plants, but then I supplement it with organ meat and shellfish because they're really nutrient dense. So, one important thing to consider is that there are water soluble vitamins like vitamin C and all and I'm trying to remember what other ones. But yeah, like vitamin C is a really important one. But then there are fat soluble vitamins like vitamin B12 and vitamin A and vitamin D. And those kind of vitamins you can't get a whole lot of out of plants unless you're really focused with what you're eating. So that's why I've switched to incorporate a little bit of animal product in my diet. And that goes with my level of activity as well, because I'm a runner. So I, it's not, I've learned that it's not just the vegan diet that causes anemia, which is what I've been struggling with. Um, but it's actually the activity of running, because every time you step, there's blood cells in the vessels in your feet, and those blood cells just break on impact because the impact is so strong. So every step you're taking, you're like destroying thousands of blood cells. So just because of that, it's really hard to you have to be really uh on top of your iron to make sure that you can replenish that. So that's one of the reasons why I switched. But another reason is just for overall wellness. Um so yeah, we're going to go through some of the more popular diets, sell their pros and their cons, and just our thoughts about them. Uh so probably one of the most popular diets is the paleo diet, which I touched on a little bit. Um, and basically, this is the diet where you don't eat anything that has been added to our diet after we learned how to farm. So that means no grains, no beans, uh, just lots of. I think you can have like fruits and stuff. Yeah, you can have like
Yeah,
vegetables and fruits and nuts, but you can't have anything that's been processed or like recently added to agriculture, I guess. So
and
go ahead.
I feel like that with like a lot of diets now are really based on kind of the obesity epidemic we have. So a lot of them, that one is more like you were saying based on the past, but a lot of diets like low carb and keto are based very, very solely on fat loss. And the more I've looked into them, whereas that's like that's what should come from a healthy diet. If that's the whole purpose of a healthy diet, there's definitely some boxes that are left unchecked.
Yeah. So I can really get behind the whole leaving out processed foods thing. That's really good. You should always have your foods as whole as possible. A rule of thumb that I use is to try to keep my foods only like 3 steps from its natural form max. So like I'll use honey because that's in its natural form. That's like a really good sweetener. Maple syrup sometimes because that's only like 1 step from its natural form. You take the maple sap and then you boil it. That's 1 step. But like uh granulated sugar is a whole bunch of steps. You have to extract the cane juice, you have to evaporate it, you have to get rid of the molasses, and then usually they bleach it and then they like granulate it. So that's a whole bunch of steps. And uh an analogy that I like to use is like think about cocaine. So people in the Andes have been chewing coca leaves for a long time and they haven't had any ill effects. It's just basically like caffeine for them. It's a little boost. But once you start isolating things and going through a whole bunch of steps and refining and processing it, and so like they went through the step of like you press the leaf and then you get the powder and you boil it and then you extract the cocaine from it with a whole bunch of steps, and then that's when it starts causing problems because like thousands of years they've been eating the coca leaves with no problems, but then once you extract the cocaine, then it becomes problematic because it's so many steps from its natural form.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the purity of it. Like if you eat an apple, it has a decent amount of sugar,
But it's
but
got
that's
other
natural.
things with it.
Yeah, but if you think of so that's why our taste buds a lot of times are adjusted to enjoy sweetness, is looking
Yeah.
out for those healthy foods that weren't going to hurt us. But now if you take like the idea of like a milk chocolate bar, that sugar's been so purified that
Yeah, it's almost
it's
it's
a farther.
hijacking our brain really.
Yeah, and it's doing a similar thing to drugs, that idea of taking something that in very small and natural doses are healthy, but once you jack it up to a certain, it can almost be addictive and habitual to just, then that's why it's commonly seen as like a coping mechanism is to eat because of how the pleasure centers in our brain activate because they think they're doing something really, really good for survival, but it's just like you said, hijacking that part of our brain.
Yeah, and wasn't there like a study a while ago that found that sugar is like one of the most addictive substances? Like it's actually up there with cocaine. And I think that's just the same thing because it's like so purified and isolated. It's having that in isolation really that's a bad thing. Because if you just went and you were like munching on a sugar cane, it would be sweet, but you're also getting all the fiber and all these other different things that are with it that kind of drown it out and make it so you're not getting such like a big dose at one time. Um,
Mhm.
that it's not actually that bad of a thing. But yeah, you can like by eating a bunch of sweet food, you can reprogram your brain and your taste buds to like just really be almost desensitized to sugar. It's kind of like becoming dependent on a drug. You need more to get like the same stimulus.
Mhm.
Um,
I know I experienced that with just a switch from, like, Jif peanut butter to natural peanut butter
oh
that's
my
just
gosh.
peanuts,
Yeah, I've
and
go ahead.
when it first started, I the natural peanut butter was I love peanuts, and that's all that's in there, but it was, like, disgusting. I didn't like it. After a couple months, I tried normal Jif peanut butter, and it was like I was eating, like, a Reese's cup because
Yeah.
of how much, like, sugar and salt is added to
Yeah,
it.
that's what I've noticed. So I too eat natural peanut butter and I have been for like probably 4 years now. But sometimes when I'm like really desperate and there isn't anything else, I have to use Jif, and it tastes so salty to me because they put a bunch of salt in there because I think I mean it's a flavor enhancer, but yeah, it's just yeah, it's crazy. Um so anyway, yeah, we're talking about the paleo diet. So whole foods, that part is really good. But I it also encourage like getting rid of the beans and the grains. I'm not so sure about uh because just because it's a new thing doesn't mean it's bad. And I think there I I've had a really hard time finding like a definitive answer on this subject, but a lot of people argue that there's these things called like anti-nutrients in grains and legumes, and it like phytic acid in those, which is like it binds to certain minerals and vitamins and makes them inaccessible to your body. So like that's their reason for avoiding grains and beans is like there's this phytic acid that prevents you from getting all the nutrients from it. But there's a really easy way to work around that. All you have to do is soak your grains or your beans before you eat them. So with just a little bit of forethought, if you can just remember to put your beans in some water before you eat them the night before, you can avoid that. And with your grains, you can even go a step further and sprout them. You can do the same thing with beans. So basically, to do that, you just get it wet, you soak it for 12 hours, then you let it drain for 12 hours, and you do that on and off for a couple days, and they'll sprout. And then that gets rid of a lot of the phytic acid. Up to you can get it's anywhere from 50 to 100%. So basically, you can with just a little bit of forethought, get all the nutrients out of it. And the nutrients in them are really good. So I see no reason to cut them out of your diet. Just because they're a new thing doesn't mean they're bad.
And I would see even if you had those fears, like you were saying, soaking them, but also if you're really afraid of them, maybe just eating them in moderation, like anything else, and allowing that, like if you're really that afraid of them, allowing your body to kind of see, like through like cholesterol tests and 'cause, I mean, we're supposed to go to the doctor every 6 months. If you'd slowly incorporate them through one of those periods and see how your body's doing after that, that'd be a good way to kind of gauge your response to them.
Yeah. And another thing, if you don't feel like soaking your grains, you can. I've recently just restarted my sourdough making because of this epidemic. I have extra time now. Um, and fermentation, it also unlocks a lot of those nutrients that would be inaccessible. And you can ferment beans as well. It's kind of like it's almost the same thing as sprouting, except or it's basically you just soak the beans, but you just keep them in the water for a couple days at a warm temperature, And be warned, it smells disgusting. I mean, it just smells like the biggest fart ever, but it they it does make it more nutritious for you. So if you can stand the smell, uh go ahead and ferment your beans. But yeah, sourdough bread, uh I haven't I have heard that people who are sensitive to gluten are able to tolerate sourdough bread because it's that natural fermentation, um, and because it's just a more it's a less processed product, and it's a more natural enzymatic activity. It allows them to digest it perfectly. So
Uh, that's interesting.
yeah, and I mean, there's also the whole idea of like our agriculture system is pretty whack. Like our soils have just been depleted of all nutrients, and that means that I tend to believe that that means that our food are pretty depleted of their nutrients as well. So whenever you can, go for that local stuff and see the difference. Just I won't say anything about it, but just see the difference because it's palpable.
That's kind of similar to what's happened with fish. Fish is like a lot of studies have shown as like a meat, fish are healthier than some other ones. But due to the large portion of plastic in our ocean,
Mm,
they find microscopic plastic particles in the fish,
yeah.
which is now leading some researchers to say we should even limit our consumption of fish to even more so than what would normally be said based on like a balanced diet, simply due to those microscopic plastic particles in them.
I've heard I there was this study where they were trying to do a study on the effects of microplastics, and they couldn't do the study because they couldn't find a single person who didn't have significant levels of microplastics in them. Like they went all the way to like those tribal Amazon people, and they even had significant quantities of microplastics in them. So I it seems like it's almost unavoidable now. I wish there were some way we could cleanse ourselves of it, but yeah, I don't know. And I don't know if it seems like there's probably just as much microplastic in meat or like in beef or chicken as there would be in fish.
And I guess simple like the idea that it's gotten into our water supply would be
Yeah.
like a possibility.
Yeah. So, yeah, we keep we keep talking about diets, but we keep going off the other way. So so yeah, I gave the basics of the paleo diet. So my verdict is uh you don't need to go for I like the whole foods part of it. I like the fruits and vegetables, but I don't think meat should be a significant portion of the diet. I think it should be a luxury, something enjoyed occasionally, because I believe in the persistence hunting theory, which says that humans evolved as runners that would chase after prey for hours until they were exhausted. Um, and think about how often would you be willing to go out and run for 6 hours at a time? Uh, you would want to take at least a couple days between those spurts. So once in a while, go ahead, have some meat, but and don't just go for the lean meat. Like go for every part. Go for the organs, go for the fat, go for the skin, go for everything because the fat has a lot of those vitamins in it. And what you'll find with when you eat meat occasionally is that you can splurge and you can buy really high quality locally raised stuff. And that's good for a couple reasons. It's just a better product, and you're supporting the local economy because like more of the money will stay in the local economy if you shop locally. Uh, it's more sustainable, and like because there's no transportation of it. Like they don't have to ship it from Iowa to Michigan or wherever. So, and and I also tend to steer away from diets that say low carbs because if you look at what the brain needs to function, it's pretty much all carbs. That's all your brain is running on. So like if you eliminate carbs, your brain function is going to be impaired. And yeah, I I just I think the whole carb scare thing is misplaced. They're not afraid of carbs. They're afraid of processed carbs. So,
Y- I feel like it's like similar to the whole in like the past century, the whole fat versus sugar argument, where there
mm,
was a time period where everything was low sugar and crazy high in fat. Then
yeah.
it switched and everything was low fat and crazy high in sugar. It's just the idea of um, just finding a moderation of those things in your diet
Yeah.
and really like looking at like the science behind what a healthy amount of that is. And I feel like a lot of those diets, like low carb, are really, really based around this idea of just the quickest possible weight loss,
Mm,
even if that compromises the overall health and like personal longevity, which is like a pretty scary thing to think about.
yeah.
Because I'm all for the idea of losing weight and getting healthier, but if that compromises your health as an individual, it's it doesn't really seem like it's worth it.
Yeah. I I I kind of struggle a little bit because we're in the midst of this body positivity movement, and I do I think that being lean, not skinny by any means, but having a healthy level of fat is is a crucial part of being healthy. Uh, so I struggle because I want people to be confident with their bodies, but I also want people to be healthy. So when you embark on uh when you consider dieting, make sure you remember what your goals are. Because if your goal is to lose weight, that's probably not the best goal. Your goal should be to be healthy uh, and well for a long time, and make sure you pick something that's sustainable.
'Cause any healthy diet, along with healthy exercise regimen, you're going if you are above where your body it naturally operates, you're going to lose that weight just simply by being at a caloric deficit. That's going to happen. It just doing it healthily might take a longer time, but in the end, you'll be much happier with like the healthy environment and healthy habits you like developed in the end.
Yeah, and there's like this cycle that always repeats where it's like a pendulum. We swing to one side. It's like, oh, you got to have lots of fats and like no carbs. And then the pendulum will swing the other way and it'll be an overcorrection. We'll say, no, you can have no fat. You got to be all carbs. And the answer is almost always in the middle. So,
Hmm.
yeah, just keep that in mind. All right, next diet. The vegan diet. So yeah, DJ and I have both been vegans for at least some period of time, and it's one of the better diets I can say, but it's not complete. It's I
And
think
I
I think it's really important for people to understand that a meal doesn't have to have meat in it. Like so many people are just like they look down at a vegan meal and they're like, okay, but this is just the side, right? So
yeah,
I think
where's the protein?
yeah. Yeah, there's so many like classic arguments. Uh and some of them are true. Like the iron, the problem with iron and certain nutrients and vitamins, those are well placed concerns, but the protein one, that is I hate that one because we're so obsessed with protein, but like there are very few people that actually need to increase their protein intake. Most people eat too much protein. Like I read somewhere that the average American eats 150 grams of protein a day, and those are like the people that are not even trying to increase their protein intake. Um, and like the most active people, I've heard they only need like 50 grams of protein because as you become more active, you don't need to increase your protein intake because your body learns how to use the proteins it has more efficiently. So, You don't need more protein. Just if there's anything you get from this episode, let it be that.
And even if you really look at the label, and if your goal is a protein-based diet, which Evan said is not as required as it's commonly believed to be, but if there's a lot of easy ways to get protein, a healthy amount of protein in a vegan diet. If you think like legumes, any kind of nuts, there's plenty of different very protein dense plants out there that are relatively inexpensive and very common.
Yeah, and we talked about earlier how like a lot of unhealthy foods can be vegan, and that is true. And that's why I I go the step beyond vegan and I say whole foods plant-based, which isn't strictly vegan because you can put animal products in that diet and still have it qualified as plant-based. Uh, but I find that is the better version. So yeah, people that are vegan tend to live longer. They tend to have uh lower BMI because mostly that's just because it's hard to eat a lot of calories if you're eating really good vegan food. You'll be
Yeah, definitely.
the fiber in it really fills you up and all that stuff. So,
One tip I would have is steam your vegetables if you go vegan.
mm,
At least some of the times, because I did a little bit of personal research with this when I did like my little stint as being a vegan, and I found that especially if you have like a sensitive stomach, that switch to there's a lot of bacteria that lives on vegetables that not necessarily is unhealthy, but simply switching from a normal diet to a vegan one, especially a whole food vegan one, it'll take your body some time to adjust. And by steaming your vegetables, that can make that adjustment period a lot more comfortable.
and when I say whole food plant based, I don't mean raw food. Uh, some people tend to think that raw food is better, um, and I don't really subscribe to that because cooking is unlocks so much of the stuff that's trapped inside of all the calories and the nutrients that are trapped in food. So I think cooking your food is fine. Uh, some people say that it like kills the enzymes and bacteria in it. And if you're worried about enzymes and bacteria, just add fermented food to your diet. Um, that's what I'm going to say about that. Um, Low carb diets. We kind of already talked about that. Carbs aren't bad. That's my stance.
Yeah, and I would say it's a lot better to look at what you're putting into your body as opposed to what does the carb say on the label. Like, of course, you don't want to be in like an insanely high carb surplus. That's not healthy either. But if you're eating a bunch of junk food that's low carb, it's even though you're within your diet's parameters, that's still not going to foster like a healthy body and healthy lifestyle long term.
Yeah. If you're going to look at any number related to like carbs, I would look at the glycemic index, which is like kind of an approximation of like how much is this going to make your blood sugar spike. And believe it or not, all these foods that are low glycemic index are whole foods, which that means that like when you have the whole food, like all the if you don't isolate the carbs in it, it'll be a more consistent stream of carbs instead of a really fast spike. So, yeah, the carbs aren't bad. It's just certain types of carbs, like really refined carbs that are bad. Um, Low fat diet. Uh Again, I I don't think fat should be a huge component of uh your daily intake, but it also shouldn't you shouldn't be trying to limit it because like I said there are water soluble and fat soluble vitamins and you have to have a certain amount. You have to eat a certain amount of fat in order to get those vitamins. Like I've heard that there are vitamins and like if you eat cheese with tomato or something like that, because of the fat in the cheese, you're able to get more vitamins out of the tomato. So yeah, fat is a essential part of a healthy diet, but like we said, the solution is pretty much always in the middle. So not low fat, but also not high fat.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, what do you think about the Mediterranean diet?
Um, I, I think the Mediterranean diet is pretty good. Uh, the Mediterranean and like the Okinawa diet they're kind of similar, where it's like you, it's lots of whole foods and the occasional animal product, and it's not like I don't know. It's just it's a good balance of things. It's not trying to be low fat or high fat, and it's just it falls in the middle, and it's a good diet, and it's
And
the science has shown that it's really it's good for longevity and wellness. So yeah.
okay, I know Okinawa lands in one of those blue zones that studies have shown are like the areas of highest longevity.
Yep.
I think one of them's in California, and that was one of the like one of the similarities they found between all of them is that they have like a healthy, whole food, plant-based diet
Yeah.
that's kind of like you were saying, stuck right in the middle of all these different nutrients and not trying to be one of kind of like the fad type diets of like low carb. It's a very sustainable diet and a very natural based diet.
Yeah. And then yeah, so pretty much just like yeah, the whole foods is an essential part of a diet, and then occasional animal products. And that can be like you can do like 90% of your calories from plants, and then like once a week have a full like fish or something like that, or you could make more of your calories from uh plants and then have like really nutrient dense parts of animals or nutrient dense shellfish to get the most bang for your buck. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was gonna agree with you definitely that idea of I think one of the biggest things too is finding out what you can get locally.
Mm,
Like if you live next to a large body of water, a lake, or an ocean, that idea of getting the different sea life will be a lot easier for you. But if you live in a landlocked place, you might want to stick away from it because it'll most likely be imported from somewhere else,
and
and
that's
not cut it out of your diet, but allow definitely try to focus on more local goods if that's possible within your budget, within your home.
yeah. And if you do, yeah, like I said earlier, if you do like just occasional meat, you'll find that you'll be able to splurge and have like a really nice cut of meat. Um, yeah, and so if you're like, I'm fortunate because I live next to a large body of water, so I can get good fish products. But if you are in the interior of a continent, um, you can also just do organ meats, and those are really high in nutrients. They might not taste the greatest, but they're really good for you. Um,
I, I I think the idea of also like you don't just have to have like an organ by itself like you would a steak. You could mix it into like a pasta or a
yeah,
salad.
I've heard
So
that
this idea,
you can do like half ground beef, half like liver in a chili or something like that, and it's basically just like super meaty, and it makes the chili meatier, but you also get the benefit of the high mineral and nutrient content.
I think that's the biggest thing too that's not really pushed so much with like healthy whole food diets is there's a lot of really good food in there
Yeah,
that it not everything just has to be like I know a lot of diets when they talk about fitness, it's chicken breast and broccoli, and
yeah,
that's like day in, day out, that's all they eat. Looking at this diet, if you have the time to put in just like a couple minutes of prep for each meal, you can make some very like delicious and a wide variety of different like food culinary styles and still be able to stay within this diet. I think that's what when you stop looking at like low carb, low fat, low whatever, that really opens up a lot of those doors of just like simply living within that moderation.
Yeah, and another thing, we I think another a really important part to any decision on diet is you have to commit to making your own food. A lot of people think they're too busy to make their own food, but I would say a part the all diets should have the component of you're making your own food, because if anything, that's just a time for you to slow down. And we'll talk about in future episodes about being mindful and meditation and all that stuff. But really take your time and enjoy the process of cooking your own food, because it's a really fun thing, and it's a full experience from preparation. If you can do like the whole thing where you like grow your own food and then you prepare it and then you cook it and then you eat it, that's like one of the most rewarding things ever. But you can also just go through the preparation and eating, and that's also really rewarding. And if you can just like force yourself to slow down, um, and when you become invested in your food, I feel like you take more time to enjoy it. So not only is it like rewarding on like a hey, I did something, but because you slow down to enjoy it, um you end up eating more moderately sized portions. So, yeah, that's
And I
a
think
thing to consider.
another thing with this diet too is if you have like an extremely packed schedule, but let's say 1 or 2 days a week where you can squeeze in some time, you can prepare these meals. Like not all, it doesn't all have to be prepared right when you eat it, because obviously people have jobs, people have families, a lot of things to take care of. So if let's say a Sunday night you have a 2 hour block, you can use that as time to prepare maybe some of your lunches throughout the day while you're at work and use that as kind of a cool down time at the beginning of the week. And definitely, like Evan was saying, that idea of mindfulness and really slowing down. And it's a very, very rewarding thing to do if you have the time for it.
Yeah. Um throughout this pandemic, epidemic, whatever it is, um we haven't ordered a meal out. We've cooked everything and it has been just amazing. And I'm also uh starting to grow my own stuff for my garden. So I'm already looking forward to being able to cook with the food that I get from my garden. So if you have any space, I would encourage you to do a garden, because that's just like it's it's just incredibly rewarding, and to like get the fruits of your labor is one of the best feelings ever. Um well, we have more diets to talk about, but we're at almost 40 minutes. Shall we keep going?
Um, I don't, what do you, I think we've touched on most of the main points to talk about. Are there any like main diets you'd like to get to?
Not really. We talked about all the a lot of the other diets are just kind of variations on either like low fat or high fat. Like there's the keto diet, which is also high fat, and I don't subscribe to that for reasons I've mentioned earlier in this episode.
And
Uh,
then I feel like the only real main one we missed is vegetarian, but in talking about vegan, we kind of touched on all of those uh, different things. And with a lot of meats, they have the same pros and cons of animal products in general.
yeah.
So the same, it can kind of be applied universally between those two.
One thing that I will add: intermittent fasting. That is something that I would encourage a lot of people to incorporate. Um, because it's really good for resetting your insulin sensitivity. Uh, Even if you don't change anything else by your diet, if you just want to continue your standard American diet, incorporate intermittent fasting, because it Uh, if you're at a lot of people are at risk or even pre-diabetic. Um, so intermittent fasting can do wonders for uh, making you boosting your insulin sensitivity, and it also I I don't know. I've just been it helps me concentrate. Like you might think, oh, I'm gonna feel like I'm starving and I'm not gonna have any energy. But what actually ends up happening is you end up feeling hungry for an hour, and then after a while, you start magically getting more energy, and that's because you have enough fat on your body to last you for 30 days. You just kind of fall into this habit of eating all the time.
Habitually.
Yeah.
I
So,
know there's a lot of different modifications of intermittent fasting. How do you do it? What like time periods do you do it, and how many times a week?
well, because I run, I it's pretty necessary for me to have a pretty constant stream of calories. But what I end up doing is every day that I have a morning run, which is Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays, I don't eat anything after dinner, which usually is about 7 o'clock. So, and then I get up also at about 7 o'clock, and then I run and I do a lift or something. So it's not usually quite 16 hours, but I try to make it to about 16 hours of fasting before I start eating. So
And is
that's how I
that is
do it.
that I think that's the pretty common interval, the
Yeah.
16 hours. So yeah, and I think that's a good example that this isn't something that needs to be done every day, and it can be manipulated, and it can even be slowly added into your schedule. Maybe do it one day a week, and
Yeah.
then eventually, when you get used to it, add in a second day a week. You can really, it's a really nice thing because it helps to if you're really looking at weight loss and that's a priority for you. This is a very healthy way to do it, and it can also be slowly added in.
Yeah. It's something that you can commit to as much as you want to, and you will see benefits at every commitment level. That's something that's kind of rare. Because usually it's like if you do something just a little bit, you're not going to see any benefit from it. But truly, at any if you just did this one day at a one day a week, you would see a lot of benefit. So, yeah.
And one last thing, this is just something I thought of, water intake. I hear a
Oh
lot of
yes.
this 8 glasses a day. And if you're thirsty, you should drink water.
Yeah.
And you should like if you've had 8 glasses, but it's 6 p.m. and you're super thirsty, there's no reason to not drink more water. That whole 8 glasses, when you think about the idea of calorie intake, there's a range of thousands of calories between different people at different activity levels and how much they need to sustain their like a healthy lifestyle. It's exactly the same with water. Different people need different amounts of water, and the best indicator of that is thirst. And even drink when your thirst is sometimes a little bit too late. That's more so with physical activity, but
Mhm.
just no, you're not going. Obviously, don't chug water all day, but if you're drinking water consistently throughout the day, that's a very healthy way to approach drinking water. I don't really know where the whole 8 glasses of water a day came from, but it's really not based. If anything, that's a minimum,
Yeah.
and you should really gauge it on a personal level, same as with diet.
Yeah. I'm one of those guys that carries around a gallon jug. Uh and I don't know if everyone needs to drink a gallon of water a day, but again, I'm sweating a lot because I run, so that's the that's the reason why I do that. And it's just a really good it's really nice for me to see like where I'm at. Uh but yeah, if I would say I I I don't think I drink anything except water, and like very occasionally I drink kombucha, but that's it. Like if there's like any one thing that you're going to cut out, it's cut out all drinks besides water. Just drink water. That's like one of the best things you can do for your health.
Yeah, and even if you need flavor, I you can squirt some lemon into the water, or like if you're real, or I've even heard if you're really trying to get off an addiction of pop, like carbonated water is a
Yeah.
good way to transition because it allows you to you still get that fizz, but without all of the harmful sugars and chemicals in there. Then eventually you can transition from the carbonated water just to normal water.
And
And I
if you're drinking diet soda, just switch to normal soda. My aunt, funny story, is actually close friends with the family that invented aspartame. So they're filthy rich, but they don't let anyone in their family touch any product that has aspartame. So that tells you something about what aspartame does. So, yeah,
yeah,
just avoid that.
yeah, and I drink. I would just say like from anecdotally, I used to drink pop, and I was never a heavy pop drinker, but it's been probably like 5.5 years since I've drank pop, and I there's no adverse effects to it, and it's the same thing with water. I drink a gallon of water a day, and there's no downs. I obviously, if you're drinking 5 or 6 gallons of water a day,
Yeah.
that's not healthy. And also, the biggest tip is drink water throughout the day. So
Yeah,
if
don't
it's
chug.
like yeah, if it's like 8 o'clock at night and you've drank a quarter gallon a day, understand this, try to do better the next day and try to drink more the next day. Don't chug down 3/4 of a gallon in an hour because you
Yeah.
feel like you have to eat that mark. That's much less healthy than just drinking it throughout the day.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up. So, thanks for listening. Yeah, this has
Yeah,
been the Chrestomathic podcast. I still don't know if I'm pronouncing that right because it's such an obscure word. I couldn't even find a pronunciation for it, but that's my best guess. Um, yeah, this is Evan,
this is DJ.
and we will see you next time, or hear you next time, or you'll hear us, I guess.
Yep.